Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson. Believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in a high school classroom in Brooklyn in the 1970s. That's where a young Randy Gorbman got his first taste for radio. The now WXXI News director got his start in this over-the-air English class, and new journalism was his calling when the Watergate scandal broke. Fast forward more than 50 years, and our connection comes full circle with Randy Gorbman preparing for retirement. Tomorrow is Randy's last day at WXXI. After 12 years of service here and an impressive 47 years in the business, this hasn't been an easy week for all of us at WXXI News, because I got to tell you, Randy's going to hate me saying this, and this is not going to be like, Randy's not going to love this hour. It's too bad. He's the best boss I've ever had. He is beloved here. He's an award-winning journalist who in recent days has received the key to the city of Rochester from the mayor and a proclamation from the U.S. House of Representatives. Last year, he was named WXXI's Employee of the Year. According to the New York State Broadcasters Association, Randy's one of the longest-serving news directors in the state. But despite his many accolades, colleagues and listeners alike know him as a down-to-earth, kind-hearted person whose passion for journalism is rivaled only by his passion for NASCAR or antique radio or Star Trek. Is it live long and prosper?
Evan, I've tried to teach you this before, okay?
Live long and prosper.
We'll work after the show. Okay.
Randy's the first
All
to
right.
answer the newsroom phone. He's the last to leave the office. He oversees the operation of the newsroom, files his own reports on radio and online. Plus, you've often heard him on Morning Edition and All Things Considered. I think we all know he's got one of the most recognizable and best voices in radio. And the staff around here call him the GOAT. He's the GOAT, the greatest of all time. This hour, we sit down with Randy talking about nearly 50 years in radio, how he's covered some of the heaviest stories in half a century of news, what it means to work in this sort of weird and changing industry, all of that. Even now, I got to say, your last week here, if anybody would have just dropped in here to observe, nobody would have known that this is your last week. You've run through the finish line.
Got to do the job.
I mean, it's very impressive. Do you want me to keep talking about you? Do you love this?
I don't love it, but it means I have to talk less, so I'm happy for you to continue as long as you want.
So show me, is it
yeah.
live
yeah,
long and prosper?
yeah.
What do I do with my thumb? It's
Yeah,
like
the thumb is actually supposed to be out more. I kind of like to keep it in, but yeah.
live long and
Yeah,
prosper?
Live long and prosper. And first you say peace and long life, live long and prosper.
Peace
So
and long
kind of
life.
call and response.
So I'll
Yeah.
do this at the end of the hour to you.
Feel free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Randy is willing to take some of your feedback, listeners. Be nice to him. It's the second to last day. But if you want to share some of your thoughts about what you think about Randy Gorbman, I already have some emails, connections@wxxi.org. Phone lines. We're going to have some fun this hour with Randy. I don't know if you know what we have planned, but we're going to have some
I
fun.
don't, but this has been one of those weeks, especially when you had T-shirts with my face on them yesterday at
We
the
did.
station
We
party.
had a cake with your face on it.
Cake, which no one will cut into my face, which I find kind of touching in some way.
What year was the picture on the cake from?
It was, I want to say I was still in college, just about 76, 75 in that area. I was like a 20-year-old not knowing what the heck was going on person at that point.
We're going to have some of the photos and some videos for you to see this hour, so be sure to tune into the WXXI YouTube channel if you want to see some of that as we talk to Randy. How are you feeling about all this?
And I know that it's a kind of cliche, but a bit on the bittersweet side, only in that, there's my T-shirt coming into the room. I should have probably worn it today, but I wasn't sure. That would be a little bit too much. Yeah, it feels a little weird. I've been doing this for so long, and as you know, I don't really like talking about myself too much, but I realize why, we're kind of chatting a bit today because I've been around for a while, and the business has changed so much. I will miss the people. It sounds cliche, but it's true. The people here have been great. Best place I've ever worked in this business, which is what I've been doing for so long. But I will miss that. I will miss the daily grind to some extent. But on the other hand, I'm often working 11-hour days on a regular basis. I do some weekend work, and that's kind of on me because things I want to catch up on. But I intend to do some freelance. I've already kind of signed up to do some of that in the future.
So we'll continue to hear your voice at
occasionally,
times.
yeah. But it'll be good to do it more or less on a schedule that is partially determined by me and won't involve constant, having to just grind it out.
I love this quote that you told our colleague Brian Sharp. because I did not know this. You wanted to be an electrical engineer,
Mm-hmm.
but you told Brian, I figured out quickly I had no aptitude
Yeah.
for math, and it's hard to be an engineer without that.
And it was, Brooklyn's that great school, specializes in why I wanted to go there. I know a lot of my friends were going, so I took a test, entrance exam to get in. And they had some, just really great stuff. It's a huge building, thousands of students there. And I said, I always liked electronics. Let me try that. And halfway through the program, my advisor said, Randy, you want to think of maybe just doing like a more general college prep kind of thing? Oh, why would you say that? Because I'm flunking at calculus, whatever. So luckily, they were the home for New York City's educational station, which is WNYE, both radio and TV. And for the radio program, back then, again, pre-internet days, they had different classes that they would do on the air for kids who, for one reason or another, couldn't come to school on a regular basis. So just maybe 5 or 6 of us in an English class on the air, and the teacher let each of us host it, for a day, whatever. And when I got to do that and be in front of the mic, being the ham that I am or later would become, I said, boy, this radio stuff is kind of fun. And again, it was the same time Watergate was percolating. I was watching a lot of news coverage. Again, it kind of had gripped the nation then. It was a big event television-wise. And I thought, hey, maybe I can kind of combine my love of broadcasting and my burgeoning interest in journalism, and there you go.
Who is the first journalist that really made a dent in your consciousness?
I would have to say only because he was around for so long, and I know very old school, as I guess I am to some extent, Cronkite, because I remember him, on black and white set, growing up in Queens. My parents had, we were CBS family, watched the local WCBS TV, and followed by the national news from Cronkite every night. So I would say that had probably the first kind of impact on me. But also I was listening, and I think Brian's article mentioned this. I remember when WCBS Radio had moved from Arthur Godfrey, it was more of a kind of, general entertainment show, to all news back in I was a little kid, obviously, early 60s or whatever, mid 60s. And when they went all news, my mother just kept that frequency on the radio. So I'd be getting ready for school, listening to, to news in the background while I was having breakfast. And that kind of got me into the radio bug also.
By the mid-'80s, you were working. I was just a young boy, and I remember one of my first memories of news was we had one of those televisions that was like in this wooden, frame.
We all did, sure.
Yeah, I think what I remember of that room was there was the Davenport, and
There's a word I haven't heard in a while.
we had an Afghan, and we had this wood-paneled TV. I mean, it was like all
Taking
things
me
that
back
my kid
to
would not
whatever.
recognize,
Right,
right?
I was going to say your kid would say what?
Yeah, he would say a Davenport.
Yeah.
Get off the Davenport. And I remember getting off the Davenport and going over to the TV because I was like, well, I don't want to watch Oliver North. And
Yeah.
so I turned the channel and he was on every channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember thinking, why is this guy sitting and talking to the government on every channel?
Yeah.
And of course, it was the Iran-Contra
Right.
hearings, and so that's when, like, even as a little kid, my consciousness was, oh, news coverage, interesting. You mentioned Watergate. What I'm curious about is if there will be anything that could rise to that level where it sort of stops everything. We almost this week with the Signalgate stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that really broke through for a moment, but there's so much fragmented media, and people are literally consuming media all the time now that it's hard to get everybody to stop and watch the same thing.
Very difficult, and because again, and holding my phone here, of course, I have to have it near me in case God forbid something happens
Something
and
breaks.
I don't know about
That's
it.
right.
Because it is so fragmented, and I think the Trump folks, to some extent, there's been some chatter about this in various media sources. They're figuring, hey, this thing is going to blow over at some point, and a lot of times it does. You know what it's like. Things are the flavor of the day, or if you're lucky, if you're trying to get attention, maybe for a few days, but the attention span is very short. Back then, you had one or two, or actually back, I guess, 3 networks, but except for like places where I grew up in New York, weren't that many channels to even watch. So sure, things were on one channel or every channel. I'm going way back when I was a little kid, Kennedy assassination. These things were huge events. We've had some huge events, but back then it was very easy to grip the nation with that kind of coverage. Those days are not going to be the same again, Evan.
Well, there's a lot that is not going to be the same. I don't think people hitchhike anymore. You hitchhiked to your first job?
My first job, I was a student at SU, work study and whatever. I mean, a lot of us trying to work through school. Parents didn't have money for me to have a car, so I was getting up early a few days a week, WCNY, which was doing more classical music, but had a morning variety show, which is a weird thing to say, but a woman who did Joan, I forgot her last name, did a show in the morning, and they did news where we used some clips from the BBC and Associated Press, other things. And it took too long. There weren't that many buses running at that hour of the day. So, stick out the old thumb. And back then, we didn't really think twice about doing stuff like that. So it was downtown. I'd kind of walk down the hill from Syracuse to downtown Syracuse. And they were at Liverpool, which is a suburb of Syracuse. And hopefully I got a ride, and I didn't get killed. It was great.
How often did you hitchhike back in the day?
Oh, pretty often, because, again, I was living, after the first 2 years living on campus, lived off campus, about a mile away. I didn't mind walking, but sometimes, you were in a rush, and very often didn't think about it, just hitchhiked. Yeah.
My father in the 1960s, he said he grew up in Jamestown, New York, went to school at Miami, Ohio. He said that's how they got back and forth, from Jamestown, New York, to Miami, Ohio, Southwest Ohio, via hitchhiking. And he said it was pretty common.
Yeah.
That's just how they expected to
Truckers
travel.
would stop sometimes, not the big truck, because it's hard to, slow down a big rig and get going again, but, smaller commercial trucks. And, I suppose bad things happen occasionally then, and I suppose it was more males and females that were, hitchhiking for safety reasons, but, just didn't think about it. I remember, I don't know why I'm thinking of this. I was, didn't put this into articles, not relevant to being a journalist, but I was a part-time job. I was a foot messenger back before, again, internet days in high school. So I used to deliver things all over Manhattan. But
you were a foot massager?
Messenger. Let's
Foot
be careful
messenger.
with that. Yes, let's be very careful
you.
how we say that. The other job might have been a problem for me in later life. But in any case, so I used to deliver parcels to different offices, things like that, mainly in Manhattan. But once I had to go out to Moonachie, New Jersey, for people who are New Jersey residents, and I hitchhiked to get out there too. So,
so much has changed.
Yeah.
And what I hope hasn't changed is, and it sounds cliche and it sounds sort of romantic, but what I hope is that as Randy Gorbman retires at the end of this week, that his legacy ensures that the high level of journalism is not going away. That is certainly our intention. That is the intention of WXXI. But before I start bringing in some mystery guests here, I want to ask you how worried you are about the future of journalism.
I'm worried. And I guess the thing that worries me the most is, and I'm trying to avoid getting real political here, but there is a very general feeling, sense, and caused by a whole bunch of different factors that the term fake news has become a bit too endemic to society, where people do not trust. Maybe they trust the very narrow channel of news, whether it be a website or some blogs or something on TikTok, whatever, that they follow on a regular basis. But in general, they're very quick to think, and this is not everybody, but a certain segment of the populace, very quick to think that news is either biased or wrong, or they don't have the facts right, or they're purposely, distorting the facts. Without that sense of trust, I don't know that we are going to be able to, we certainly don't enjoy the kind of maybe popularity, so to speak, that or trust that journalism had for a number of years. It's our job to keep doing our job and hopefully and do it well. But the future is a little bit cloudy. And I do talk to classrooms occasionally, mainly college type things. I'm on journalist associations that I'm involved with, and go to talk at various colleges, universities, sometimes high schools. But try to get them to, if they're interested in this profession, to realize it's going to be a challenge. It's a worthwhile profession, I think, and I think you probably would agree. But be ready to be able to have to answer a lot of questions and take a bit of grief from folks who think, no matter what you say, you don't know what you're talking about.
Joel writes in to thank you for the work that you've done. He says, does he know how to say no? All the retirees I know are more busy in retirement than they were while working. Randy mentioned freelancing, but hope he can learn how to say no.
Yeah.
And says, can we get a narrative of his career from college to now? So what's the quick timeline?
Okay, go real quick. First job, station is no longer on the air, WIPS in Ticonderoga, New York, 1,000-watt station, which Brian talked about. We were near a dairy cow pasture, no insulation, had to keep the window open, no air conditioning, so occasionally a cow would bellow, come up to my window while I was doing the new news, and the Amtrak whistle would go off at the same time. Mm-hmm. From there, after a year, I went to WVOS, which is in Liberty, Monticello in the Catskills. Think of the old Borscht Belt, if you heard about those areas. A lot of the hotels were gone by that point. From there, I went to Utica for several years at WIBX and was news director and reporter there. And then I went to Connecticut. That was my only time out of state in Stamford. WSTC. Got to think all these call letters for about a year, and would have stayed there for a while, but I had an offer to be a news editor, basically do tape editor. Back in the days of tape at NBC Radio Network in New York. So I always wanted to work in New York for a bit. So I was there a little bit less than a year. They moved to Washington. I didn't, at the time, for personal reasons, didn't want to move down there. Went to Albany to another station, which is a 50,000-watt station, but is off the air now. They eventually went dark. That's a whole other story, WPTR. And then I came here, Rochester, in 94. I went to Wham. I was away briefly back to Utah for a couple of years, but then I came back to Rochester. So I've been here more or less for about 17 years at least.
And the last 12?
Last 12 here.
Last
right.
12 here.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have some of his first report from Wham? Can we just listen to a little bit of that now?
Uh-oh.
Randy Gorbman's
Here's
first,
trouble.
1994.
Yeah.
Let's listen.
When Rochester's race riots began one hot summer night on July 25, 1964, the Reverend Raymond Graves, who now heads the Rochester United Church Ministry, was living near the area where the trouble broke out, but he wasn't the first to find out something was wrong.
Strange enough, I was in the bed when it broke out, and my bishop called me from Washington, D.C., wanted to know what was going on in Rochester. I said, what's going on? I said, nothing. He said, oh, yes, it is. It's rioting up there.
There are all kinds of reasons some have speculated were the cause of the riots, but Reverend Graves believes he knows what sparked the melee.
One of the biggest problems we had in Rochester at that time was the slum landlords.
And he says that years after those 3 days of destruction, people were still worried about another riot.
You see, it didn't end that summer, because every summer thereafter for a long time, people would get frightened when the weather started getting warm. Do you think we're going to have a long, hot summer?
The riots of the 1960s may seem like a long time ago, but the Reverend Graves believes that with the problems society faces today, it could happen again.
The riots sent a signal across this country, and it sent it to America, and that signal is still waving out there. And that somebody better take a long, hard look at it, because if we have riots the next time, it's not going to be a black-white situation.
And the Reverend Graves went on to say he hopes and prays that day will never come. Tomorrow, as we wrap up our look at remembering Rochester's race riots, we'll hear from a reporter who covered the events as they unfolded. I'm Randy Gorbman, News Radio 1180 WHAM.
Wow, that brings me back. And, we did...
31 years ago.
It's hard to believe it was that long ago. And we did a recap here when I came to XXI. And I'm trying to remember what the anniversary was, but we did something similar, multi-part thing. And unfortunately, some of the same causes and reasons and issues involved, didn't change all that much. And by the way, may he rest in peace. Reverend Graves, he was controversial at the time, bit of a firebrand, but I always appreciated anybody I could talk to in this town who was willing to talk. I mean, rarely ever shied away from, responding if we called him for something, did an interview, and had some strong opinions, but also had lived a lot of that. And his perspective was a really important part of that piece.
David Donovan, president of the New York State Broadcasters Association, said Randy Gorbman set the gold standard for news directors. There are very few that can compare with his service record. Tomorrow is his last day at WXXI, although, as he said, he's going to freelance. You'll hear his voice here and there, but he has earned a retirement, and we are reluctantly agreeing to that.
Yeah, I thought you guys were just going to chain me to my desk, and that would be it.
But before we got a long way to go in this hour,
boy.
so this is your life, Randy Gorbman. You ready for that?
This is going to be
Do you remember
trouble.
that show?
It was an interesting show because sometimes they bring somebody out who the guest didn't really want to talk to. Yeah. Hopefully that won't happen
I'm
today.
trying to think of who that could be.
Okay.
Randy Gorbman, this is your life. We're going to hear from some people from your past. You may not know who some of them are right away, or maybe you will.
Love this music, by the way. It's
Let's
great.
see. Let's bring on our first mystery caller. Are you there, caller? Do we have him there?
Hello.
Hello.
Am I on? Am I on the air? Hello there. Hello, Randy Gorbman. Yes, I first met Randy Gorbman, let's see, in 1994. So that was the same year you came to WHAM there, wasn't it there, sir? Yeah, it was a long time ago. My first real news director, with the messiest desk
Now, come
anyone
on, Joe.
I had ever seen. It was a
Casting
fire
aspersions here.
That desk was.
It was.
It was absolutely incredible. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I was fortunate to have been blessed to work alongside him in a prime time capacity for some 20-plus years in the afternoons as he read the news I would try to make him laugh on the other side of the microphones, and maybe I got you once or twice there, Randy Gortman.
Joe LaMonaco, one of the, and I'm saying this, one of the all-time best production guys, still works at Wham, of course, but has got an incredible range of voices.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, just amazing.
He could have chosen any one of 1,000 characters,
Yep.
Joe LaMonaco. Thank you for being on with us. How are you doing
my
these
pleasure.
days, Jolo?
I'm doing good. I'm calling in from my basement studio. I now have the privilege of working from home and doing that production work for iHeartRadio nationally as well as in Rochester. But I'll tell you just a quick thing, and this is not to pump any sunshine up Randy's skirt because I enjoy doing that when I'm in person. But anyway, you know what? When I came to WHAM in 1994, it was my second job in radio out of college. I had no intention of doing news at all. It was not the path I thought I was going to be on. And because of working alongside of Randy, I don't know whether I necessarily became enamored of news, but I became enamored of the culture and the newsroom that he created and what it was like to be creative in going out and finding stories to tell, interesting stories to tell and ways to tell it. And that is probably the best part of my time with him in a professional capacity, is that even though I wasn't a news guy and I never considered myself a news guy, it was just a privilege and pleasure to be able to work alongside somebody who was so good at it, finding stories, finding angles on stories, and we just had this incredible entity that was built in that newsroom. And it wouldn't have been built if Randy hadn't been there to run it.
Joe, nice of you to say, but the 5 o'clock news hour, which is still on the air, but when Jolo did it, Jolo, who people don't know, Joe LaMonaco, that's his nickname. He was a superb afternoon host, and he actually was pretty easy to crack me up at times, but I always try to pick a kicker. You know, it's a funny little story that you do at the end of a newscast. And Joe often would say something. I try to make him laugh or vice versa. But that hour used to sing, Joe, and I know you did it for so many years. And that was one of my most enjoyable, I guess, on-air experiences, is working with you on that hour.
Yeah, it was just a fantastic experience. Like I said, you didn't make me a news guy, but you made me enjoy being part of a newsroom, and I think that's quite a thing.
Joe, I got to say, I mean, I listened to that 5 o'clock news hour many times, driving either back to the newsroom myself or out in the community. Joe's vocal talent is about as good as it gets.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I also know that everyone who's going to be calling in appreciates you, and I'm glad to start with you, Jolo. Anything you want to add before we let you go, Joe?
Careful on the stories, Joe. Some things are,
Yeah, I know. Well, I'll always remember, because I don't know whether he still does this. Randy had a way of working with people on the phone. If he would leave a message, and he would always spell his last name.
Yep.
And this is the thing that's always in my head. It's like, it's Randy Gortman, G-O-R-B as in boy,
Always.
M-A-N. He would always put the B as in boy.
Yep.
So there's always that little boy that's still with Randy.
Yep.
Every time he spells his name, there's just that little boy right there in the middle.
Yes, people on St. Patty's Day, one guy said, "Hey, you must be enjoying it. Are you one of the O'Gormans?" I said, "No, not quite. Different side of the European continent there, so to speak."
Joe, hey, thank you, and much respect for the work that you do as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
for
Joe.
being
You
part of
as
this
well.
hour.
Evan Dawson, thank you for having me on the Very nice. Thank you.
Joe LaMonaco.
Oh, man.
Worked with Randy for 20 years at WHM, leading us off with This Is Your Life. All right, you ready for round 2 here? Randy Gortman, This Is Your Life. And let's see here. Who else could we have on the line? Caller, are you ready? We got him? Go ahead, next guest. Let's see here. See if he knows he's on.
Hello, Randy.
Oh, there he is.
You know, speaking of gold standards and hard-hitting journalism, it was you and I out in a snowstorm
Oh my
in
God.
March 2017
It took him a second. It took him
Juan
a second.
Vasquez for a second. I was like, "What?"
on Facebook Live.
That was one of my most all-time fun things. Juan and I was one of those, it used to be more typical of Rochester, but it was snowing like a son of a gun, and Juan and I here, and Juan, I think we had you had like an iPod at that point, didn't you, or something like that, or I forgot, or one of our old
I
cameras.
think it was an old iPod, I believe, is what we had
So we walked down.
to go out there.
Yeah, go down State Street, and we go down here down State to Maine. There's not many people out, and it's snow. I mean, we're bundled up like crazy, and it wasn't even wireless. One had like a cable attached to me. I tried to do a stand up. I had my hat and a parka, but what's kind of embarrassing. So we're sitting there, and of course, who do you find that snowstorm? A couple of characters came up. They were good natured guys. We did some stuff, and while I'm there, and I'm look like typical reporter. I've got the thing and the weather, and across if you look in the video, which is we'll have to post it somewhere. Across the way, you see this guy in like a jogging suit, like just a polyester jogging suit with no coat, and he's just jogging along. So it makes me look like a fool. Like here I am in this coat, and this guy's just like.
Don't worry,
along.
I think we actually have the audio. Do we? Let's listen a little, and you can watch on YouTube as well. We've got video for YouTube and audio for. Let's listen.
This is WXXI News Director Randy Gordman, who made the somewhat foolish decision, I think, to come out here to Main Street and see what was going on with the snow. A little Facebook Live video with my colleague, Juan Vasquez. Sir, how are you? What's your name?
John.
We're doing Facebook Live. John, where are you going, John?
Oh, it's fire to the library.
Yeah. How you dealing with this weather today?
Oh, it's incredible. It's something new. We were expecting it. For the most part, it's been pretty decent winter. So you have to be, prepared for days like this.
Sounds like you're taking it in stride.
Oh yeah, you have to always keep gratitude in your attitude. So
I like this guy. You have a better attitude than me right now.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's all about
He made you look pretty soft.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Now, people are very casual. I'm like here, and it's like I'm used to. I've been upstate for a long time, and I'm all bundled up, and these guys are like, yeah, there's kind of.
And of course, by the way, it was Juan Vasquez with you, the jack of all trades.
Oh my
Juan.
God, this guy! First of all, if people don't. Juan, you came here, I know before I did. Innovation Trail was a prior initiative that we used to have, and Juan kind of shepherded that, from an editorial standpoint. But Juan, how many jobs did you have here? You were a reporter, you were a producer, on-air talent.
Producer, we did some stuff for our television health show, Second Opinion. I think probably the only thing I didn't do was actually host anything on Classical.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
He definitely could have. That guy can do anything.
No, this guy, and Juan actually came back with us, did some TV updates on WXXI TV for election night last year.
Yeah. So Juan, a little bit like Randy, we can't let him go fully. And we're going to try to keep Randy in the fold here. If listeners are just joining us here, Randy Gordman retires tomorrow after a nearly 50-year career and 12 at WXXI. Juan, what stands out to you most from this guy as he gets ready for his well-deserved retirement?
What really stands out for me about Randy is just the expertise that he brings, and especially when he came to WXXI. We're well thought of newsroom, but man, when Randy stepped in, he elevated it and brought certain elements to the newsroom that we had been missing for a while. That just brought us onto the map, and I can't thank Randy enough, and I hope that the listeners and the folks at WXXI, obviously with a T-shirt that says the GOAT, we can't thank him enough. But Randy, I got to ask you this, because knowing you so well, are you sure you want to retire? Are you sure?
Exactly what we're
our
wondering.
executive editor Denise keeps asking me that.
You can blink twice if that is.
That's the hostage symbol. Yeah. No, I actually it was not an easy decision, and I was talking about all the time I put on a daily, and I'm not bragging, but it's just the way the job is. But I will be glad to be able to kind of work a little bit at my own pace. And by the way, Juan, just such a fun guy. He was at some function we had for one of our employees recently, and I told Juan, I'm looking for coffee and lunch dates now, so I'll be glad to meet you in Ithaca. We'll have to find a place to chow down.
We're going to be much closer now than we were before. So
there you go.
Juan, thanks for making time for our friend Randy Gordman. Very nice of you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon here. You're always welcome back here.
And I will see you soon. So it's a pleasure, Randy.
Thanks,
you
Juan.
deserve it.
Appreciate it.
Try to sleep at least more than 3 hours a night now.
Maybe 4. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the great Juan
Thank
Vasquez,
you,
former WX. We go to break here. I want to remind our listeners that our news director, Randy Gordman, our friend, is retiring tomorrow, his last day. You would never know it. You would never know with the work output he's done this week that this is the last week he's going to be full-time here. And we're glad to be talking about this remarkable career. We're going to continue after this, our only break of the hour. All right, this is your life, Randy Gorbman. And we've been hearing from people who have worked with you, who got to know you, who have appreciated the high standard you have set in your journalism career as you get ready to wrap up and head into retirement here. Let me welcome our next guest who's on the line now. Caller, can you hear us? I think we've got him. Okay. If he's ready. Look what we've done here, Randy. We did all this work to get them all here, and now they're too shy to talk to you. After all that. Do we have him? Caller, are you there?
I'm here. Are you there?
Oh, I'm here. Go ahead, caller.
I can't believe after that big buildup that I'm going to be on this program for this guy.
Randy, do you know who you're hearing?
Got to be Chet.
He was a goat before I knew goats.
Chet Walker, my Star Trek buddy, much to his former co-host Beth Adams' chagrin, because Chet would often talk about we'd start talking about the same thing and episodes and a little bit of Klingon mixed in there, and Beth would roll her eyes to the ceiling, and we still do that.
Chet and Beth, two of the very, very best, aren't they?
Oh,
superb, by the way?
Superb combo.
I listened to them for years. How you doing, Chet Walker?
I'm doing great. I'm very honored to be on this show. I can't believe I lived long enough to see this day come. I don't even believe it.
I haven't either,
this
actually.
is a Kobayashi Marouge or something like that. He's changed the rules of the game.
Oh, Chet, you want to share anything with our listeners about what stands out to you most about this guy?
Well, all the accolades you've heard already, but let me just tell you about how I remember him back in the day. He would come busting through the newsroom door, which was, if you worked in the newsroom or was in the newsroom, was dangerous because the door didn't have a window. So he'd come busting through it. If you were standing there, you were in trouble. And he'd come in and he'd pick up a bag with, recorders and mics and wires and cords and malt box and, batteries, all the tricks of the trade back in the day. And, this bag was about the size and heft of Danny DeVito, and he'd go running out the door to cover whatever he had to cover. And then he'd come back a little while later, and he would sit down, and he would, go through, and he would type up the whole thing. He would do a couple of cuts on whatever was available at the time. It could have been tape and splicing tape, or it could have been, downloading it from a cassette or a mini disc or a DAT or eventually, an MP3, and he'd futz around with the equipment, which you always had to futz around with, but he had the ability to actually make it work. Everybody else would be waiting for something to happen, and he'd make it happen. And then, if it was really important, he'd dash into the main control, and he'd have a couple of, things written down on a small piece of paper that a pharmacist couldn't read with his handwriting.
It's so bad.
And he would bust off, a clear, a comprehensible, concise report, and then go back in and do 3 wraps, throw it up online, and then, he'd take his coat off.
It was the job. And doing this with tape, and again, it sounds ancient to people never worked with tape if you're in this kind of business, but it was a challenge. I still have the scars to prove it, using single-edged razor blades to splice tape from a reel-to-reel tape. And Chet remembers cart machines, which, if you are old enough to remember, or maybe your parents or grandparents had the old 8-tracks, kind of worked like that, but even worse. And those things would get jammed, and more than a few of those hit the wall in frustration by some reporters who go nameless, Randy Gorbman.
You do all this work, right?
Yeah.
And then the technology, which wasn't all that great.
Right. But you know what? It's whatever, you did what you had to do. Chet will tell you, and he did the same kind of thing. He's being modest here, I think, just trying to talk about me, but it was something that he did every day, and morning radio is a whole different animal. And, you have a producer, but basically you are on your own in a lot of ways and trying to get a hold of people, and it's important. It was especially pre-internet or early days of the internet. It's crucial to what this. Chet was there before I came to town, right before I came to town with the ice storm, and those guys were on, including Chet and Beth and everybody else. They were on for hours and hours and hours, and I mean, it was a real service for this area.
Yeah, that's why I had Evan on speed dial back in the day when I was like, oh man, I got to get somebody. Oh, Evan, here he comes.
Well, Chet, before we let you go here, when you said that you never thought this day would come, is that because you're among the many people who've worked with Randy Gordman who thought this guy's never leaving his office, he's not going to retire, he's going to do this forever because this is so much in his blood?
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing. I don't believe it because if he still has a scanner under his bed, he ain't going anywhere.
I'm not going to answer that question. Okay.
Hey, Chet, I want to thank you for giving some of your time for this hour. It means a lot to us. I know it means a lot to Randy, and I've been a big fan of your work and your voice. So you and Beth, I loved listening to you guys when you guys were doing your thing. Thank you for sharing your voice with this hour with us.
Chet, thanks, and we owe a lunch to each other, so we'll do that soon.
Oh, no, you owe lunch to me.
Wow, look at that. That happened pretty quickly, just like that.
That turned very fast. Thank
Very
you,
good.
Chet.
Take care,
All right,
buddy.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, we'll see ya.
That's Chet Walker. I want to say, before we bring in our next guest here, Chet did host, of course, with WXXI's Beth Adams,
Right.
and they were wonderful together. Beth Adams said recently she listened to that tape of Randy from 1994 that we played earlier this hour. I love what Beth said. She said, I'm not noticing much difference in his voice. Most of us, I'll speak for myself, she said, my voice has changed in the last 30 years. I hear it. It's thinner. There's a lot of things I don't like about it. But Randy, he could have recorded that a week ago.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate it. It was very nice of her to say, but it's kind of like use it or lose it kind of thing. So I think just being on the air all this time has helped.
And here's a comment from another one of your former colleagues, Sherry Voorhees Vincent, Sherry Smith from the Wham days.
Yeah.
She says, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on Randy Gordman. I had the incredible honor of working for and with him for many years at WHAM Radio. As a leader, he was tireless and devoted. Even when it wasn't easy, he made sure we all had what we needed in order to do our jobs. He always supported me and helped me to grow as a writer and a journalist. I accomplished more in my life professionally than I ever thought possible, largely due to his influence. As a friend, he is tireless and devoted. He is also hysterical. I can't remember a day when we worked together that at some point we weren't laughing over something. When our paths cross now, it's as if no time at all has passed and we pick up right where we left off, wisecracking and laughing. Randy, this community is so much better off having had you around for all these years, and so am I. I wish you the very best of luck in your next adventure. That is Sherry.
Yeah, she's such a good and a nice person and a huge radio talent. She started out with Peter King, who is still working for CBS Radio. The old WKLX, but she worked with us for years. Was also, helping to host and do news on the morning show. Incredibly talented on-air person, writer, journalist, and I still see her. She works for the state now. I see her occasionally. I go out to events or whatever. But it's such a great person to work with. And again, it's people like her and Chet and Joe LaMonaco that made those days of radio just some of the best I had.
By the way, she says good luck on your next adventure. Are you going to go to more NASCAR?
I really do. Yeah, I used to just go to Watkins Glen and really haven't been to a lot of tracks. Two, I guess you could say bucket list things. I want to see Daytona and I want to see the Indy 500.
Going to do it?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I mean, those are two different kinds of racing, but two huge events I had not attended before.
But more immediately, what are you going to do on Monday morning?
That's a good question.
You haven't planned out your Monday yet? Your first Monday in retirement?
I know it sounds weird, but I'll probably still listen to WXXI, listen to NPR in the morning, but not worry about, do we have this story? Do I have that story? I won't have my business report, which may come back in some occasional fashion. We're still kind of discussing that kind of thing, but it'll be weird not to be worried as much as what's on the air right now.
What are we missing?
I'll be a listener.
How do we get it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we have one more guest to bring in who's going to tell you that maybe more quickly than you think you'll be able to disengage.
Okay.
And I told this guy, him, you don't have to disguise your voice. Your voice is not disguisable. Randy will know it right away. So let me bring on our next guest. It's Bill Lau. Hello,
boy.
Bill.
Hey there, how are y'all?
You can't mistake that
He's
voice.
the best voice in Rochester.
I mean,
radio
really,
news.
a great voice.
Stop it. You
It's
just
true.
knock it off me.
Come on.
Bill had a wonderful career in news himself, and worked with, and had the chance, I think.
And he was one of the Ice Storm mainstays during the 91
Oh my
coverage.
Lord, yes.
How many days were you on, like, straight, or hours were you on straight? Would you say?
Randy, I have to tell you, Randy, I honestly don't know how many days it was. I do remember that we would walk in there. I know I personally, and everybody else who sat in that chair after and around me, I'd walk in there with just some scribbled notes. Maybe we're going to talk to this guy at this time and that, and no script. And you would do 3 hours straight on the air with no commercials, nothing, just you and talking to whoever was on the phone. It was the greatest form of radio. It was also one of the most exhausting experiences of my life.
There's a really classic photo, I think it was in the DNC, Bill, right, where you had just taken your glasses off to try to rest your eyes, and you could just feel the, probably the exhaustion, but yet you were still going day after day after day.
Oh, it was the purest form of radio and the greatest service that we could possibly render to our listeners. And that's why we were all there, you included, of course. That was the thing. That was one of the things. I wrote down here, we had better be prepared for a cosmic shift in the universe because Randy is retiring. Things are going to have to change on a grand scale because he's taken himself out of the mix. And that really is, I've never, in all those years, almost 50 years in broadcasting, almost entirely in news, never in all those times can I recall somebody as dedicated to it as you. I swear to God, I don't think you ever slept or ate.
It's true. It's true, and I'm still hungry, but that's very kind of you to say, Bill.
Possibly to this day and beyond, you know?
Well, here's another guy I got to go to lunch with. And by the way, my best to your lovely wife, Nancy, as well, and I want to get together with those guys soon.
She would have joined me here, but she's in Florida right now.
Oh, good for her.
Never mind why.
And Bill, before I let you go, can you tell Randy a little bit of what you told me yesterday on the phone, which is that when you stepped away, you were able to disengage, and you think Randy might actually be able to find his time full with other things.
And first of all, I didn't step away. I was told to step away.
Yeah, unfortunately. I was trying to euphemize, Bill.
Well, no, I don't play around on stuff like this. They threw me and 1,500 people out in the Clear Channel, then now iHeartRadio, in the bloodbath the day that Obama was inaugurated.
2009.
So,
yep.
Yeah, and I found, Randy, and I hope you find this too. For the first 2 days, let's say, I was still in radio mode because it had been my life too for all those years. So I ate, slept, and drank radio and did some other stuff when radio wasn't interfering. And for the first couple of days, I still woke up early and kind of functioned in that mindset. And suddenly, I think it was about Thursday or Friday, I forget the exact weekday. The third day, I slept in and for the first time in I don't know how many years. And I woke up and I got up and I thought, my God, so this is how people feel.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, and it's 15 years now after all, but I have to tell you that I essentially walked away from it and don't miss it. Found that the time that I had been expending on that, my work, I now had time to do many other things. And I was fortunate to fall into some volunteer work and into a side business, which I had never envisioned.
Bill does amazing work with model cars and wiring them with things like that.
I put LED lights in little die-cast cars, and people put them on the train layouts. That's about it. I've sold them all over the country, about 100 a year. I had no idea I knew how to do that, and I never would have had the time while I was working. All I'm trying to say is, knowing you as I do, first of all, you will not be able to just sit around in a recliner and go, well, I guess I'm done. Yeah. That's not going to happen. So you'll find, and it's amazing. I have no idea. Couldn't predict, neither could you. you will find something that you will be more than willing to dedicate your time to and love and enjoy every bit as much as what you've been doing for all these years. That said, everybody who ever heard you on the air, every one of us who ever worked with you, is so much enriched by your dedication to the job, your professionalism, and as Sherry said, it also was a hoot to work with you.
Well, Bill, you say way too many kind things, but I appreciate it. And I got to say, I learned so much from Bill, mainly how to do news in a conversational manner that people want to listen to. And Bill worked with a lot of young reporters and said, people don't talk like that when they wrote something that was really obtuse. And I took that to heart and still to this day remember that.
Thank you, Bill Lau.
I appreciate it.
I can't thank you enough for making time for this program today, and I know it means a lot to Randy and all of us. And we miss your voice on the radio too, Bill Lau.
I do not miss me on the radio. And Randy, definitely lunch and probably more than that.
Yeah, we'll get together. Thanks, Bill, for all your comments, for calling in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
God bless you, man, and happy
Okay,
retirement.
man. Yeah, thanks a lot, guy.
That's Bill Lau, and we couldn't find anybody who didn't love Randy Gorbman who worked with him. Here's our friend Tom Prietti writing in saying he says, Randy is the best of people. And he said if there is anything Randy could do better than news, it was teaching. Excellent professor at MCC.
Did some adjunct work, which I'd like to do again. But
could you do it again?
I might possibly. And Tom was like my mentor there, so to speak, when I started to want to do some adjunct teaching. And he was, always involved in broadcast and communications world. And great advice from him. And he was a superb teacher. And still, when I would be out at events with him or whatever, so many students, former students, some that work these stations here, would come up and say, Tom, I remember, he just had a really great impact as an educator and as somebody involved in journalism.
Well, our colleague Noel Evans writes in saying the newsroom has been glued to the screen watching transformative energy of this man. Genuinely, he has made this newsroom better with his humor and dedication, and he consistently shows he cares in even the smallest ways. Great generosity of spirit, and she's grateful. And she's really speaking for all of us. And let me just add on to Noel's comment. The reason I said that Randy's the best boss I ever had is my impression of you as a leader is that you have to work so much on what you're doing. You want people who are pretty self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
You want people who have really high standards, really high ethical standards for the work, and then you want to give them the space to do what they do without micromanaging. Because frankly, you don't have time to micromanage.
No,
you never did.
And people, I don't have to tell you, you've been in the business a long time, Evan. People don't learn if you try to micromanage everything. Sure, they need guidelines. They need somebody they can come to with questions about whether it be writing or ethics or things like that. But if you don't give somebody some space to do the kinds of stories they want to do, they're not going to advance and they're not going to help your organization.
Well, there was nobody, because we appreciate the fact that there's so much autonomy, but there is nobody that producer Megan Mack and I would have turned to first when there's a hard question. We would often say, all right, let's see what Randy thinks. And because we knew we were going to get a really well-grounded, journalistically based, ethical answer on everything we needed. But apart from that, the reason that I think you're the best boss I've ever had is the culture is so good under you. People feel like they've got room to be themselves. As long as they are producing and working hard, you want people to feel free to do that work. And you actually cared about them personally. I mean, when my son heard you were retiring, we're driving to baseball the other night, and he goes, whoa. He's turning 13 at the end of this week. He knows that you're a big deal because you ask about people. In small ways, to Noel's point, you have always cared about people without trying to insert yourself too much or micromanage. That's not an easy thing for any boss or any leader to do. And I just want to say that when you look back at your career, be proud of the journalism, but I hope you're proud of the culture that you set, because that's rare.
It's being a person. I mean, not to simplify it too much, but I've worked, as we all did, you come up through the ranks, and some people who are station owners or managers probably shouldn't have had those jobs. And I didn't want to treat people in that way. And I thought people don't produce well if you're not treating them well. It doesn't mean you don't have high expectations, but if you're not treating your staff well, if they're not having fun because it's such a tough business, able to laugh every once in a while, you're not going to stick with that business or that station. So if I've had any kind of small impact like that, I'm really happy about it.
All right, last minute or so, and I could have just read emails all hour from listeners who appreciate you. Listeners, he hates that stuff. So. But let me just read one. Laura and Victor says, in these terrifying times when the free press is under attack by those in power, we do need independent investigative and editorial journalism and local journalism. Any thoughts on how to support this essential function of the press locally going forward?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not a great fundraiser or salesperson, and you know we have those drives from time to time, and people, when they can be, are very generous. But I would just say, as you look at things online and maybe see the press under attack, you don't have to engage in people who have nasty comments, but just say supportive things if you do appreciate what you've heard or read online, and when you're meeting people just face to face, talk about stories and encourage people to, it's kind of like, I'm glad you listen or watch or read WXXI, but choose a variety of sources. Don't just stick with one thing.
Yeah.
Try to, have a full menu of things that you engage with and do it in a respectful manner. I mean, it's all you can do is just kind of say, it's important for us to know what's going on if we're going to have this democracy, this republic, and I hope people continue to do that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to tell you as we get ready to go here, all the notes you've left me, I've never been able to read them. So I've always acted like I knew what you wanted me to do. Your handwriting is terrible.
The one about the $20 I owe you, it was never written.
Please work on that in retirement.
Okay.
Otherwise, please come back around here.
Of course.
Because I know you will. You're going to freelance. You're going to be back
I'll
around.
probably be pitching here at some point on the Pledge Weeks.
Randy
Who knows?
Gorman, the shirt that's in the newsroom that a lot
Yes,
of our
oh my
colleagues
God.
were wearing yesterday.
Filled
the
my face
GOAT,
this entire
the greatest
hour.
of all time.
A little embarrassing.
Randy's face on shirts. That not a lot of bosses are leaving and they get that kind of treatment, but thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Randy's the best. Tomorrow is his last day. Listeners, if you're so inclined, find a way to salute Randy Gorman and support public radio. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And from all of us at Connections, we love you, Randy. We'll talk to you all tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.